It is time once again for another edition of PennLive's Blue-White Breakdown podcast, Penn State football podcast. I am Bob Flounders. Greg Pickel joining me remotely. The Zoom calls are still working, Greg. If I seem like I'm a little bit more upbeat, it's the weather, Greg. I'm not going to lie to you. It feels like it's almost 60 degrees out now in Harrisburg. Tape this on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the morning. Tomorrow it's going to be in the 70s. Greg, in a weird way, I'm kind of glad that next Wednesday, when it's St. Patty's Day, it's not going to be 75 degrees, because I think restrictions or no restrictions, Greg, I think people might lose their minds if it was that warm on St. Patty's Day. But we'll get to that next week. We're going to get to that next week. Before we get into it, there's going to be a lot of recruiting we're going to talk about on this edition of the Blue-White Breakdown. Dave Jones and I are going to be back later this week to talk about who knows what we're going to talk about, but he's kind of a wild card. Greg, first of all, happy birthday to Lola, your golden retriever. Turned 4 over the weekend. I heard the birthday party you had for her was a smash success. I know there'll be many, many more. She's a very good-looking dog, very well-fed, healthy-looking dog. I hope she enjoyed her birthday. How are you doing?
I'm good, Bob. All these Penn State fans who always share their Penn State dog photos with us, no one told me it was a bad idea to have multiple dogs at the house at one time. That was a learning experience, but we got through it. The house is not in too much disarray, and she's now out at the groomer getting cleaned up, and we're here to talk Penn State football.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, and you're getting her groomed at just the right time. It's about to be shedding season, so hopefully you'll get some of that taken care of. But anyway, I just wanted to pass along my birthday wishes to Lola. I always enjoy seeing her. Greg, let's just get into this. Penn State's 2021 signing class is in the books. We last month around this time there was the second signing day. But man, there's a lot of buzz, Gregory, about this 2022 James Franklin Penn State football class. And before the latest news, Greg, everyone liked this class. With the addition of a very talented 4-star quarterback, pro-style quarterback from Ohio, I want to make sure you gave me the heads up. Drew Allar, that I believe is the correct spelling. Allar. I think you told me that phonetically is correct. Hopefully.
I sure hope so, Bob, because I've been pronouncing it wrong all week.
I just rechecked my text. You said the emphasis is on the second part of the spelling. I'm going to look at it. Drew, it is it's Drew Allar. So if you're new to the podcast, hopefully we got your name right. Anyway, I know I'm burying the lead here. Greg, people are very excited about this 4-star quarterback, great size, and I think the telltale sign that this is going to be a chance to be a really good player is, it's not only the people who specifically cover Penn State recruiting that really like the potential of this kid. I've seen nationally a lot of people believe this quarterback has a chance to be one of the top quarterbacks overall in the 2022 class. I'll give you the floor. What can you tell the fan base about Drew? What do you like about him? Does he remind you of any quarterback you've seen play at Penn State? He seems to be similar in size to some quarterbacks I've seen. But what do you like about Drew?
Well, I think when you look at his tape, Bob, he can do a little bit of everything. And, I mean, you don't need to be a football watching savant to kind of put 2 and 2 together here. And it's that very good offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for a long time now, Mike Yurcich, targeted this kid pretty much the second he got onto campus, and he even had his eye on him when he was at Texas. And it's not that Ohio, it's not that Texas doesn't recruit Ohio. Of course it does. It recruits nationally. But I think that tells you all you need to know about what kind of player Mike Yurcich thinks that Drew Allar, it is what it is. We're just going to pronounce it however we pronounce it.
Just think about the word allure as she is a very alluring wife. I'm talking about your wife, Maddie. You have a very alluring golden retriever named Lola. Just think about it.
So it's Allar, actually. My phonetic, what I said was not right. So
you idiot.
Yes.
Now I'm in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Deep trouble. Thanks, Greg.
I will take all the blame on this one.
I just read my text. You killed me.
But yeah, so when you look at what Mike Yurcich wants in a quarterback, he told us when his first media session was held, kind of the things he looks for: a quarterback with good feet, good eyes, accurate. Of course, that's what everybody wants. But, he can do a little bit of everything. And Penn State sorely needed 2 4-star quarterbacks in this class, and now they have it with, of course, Bo Prabula, the Central York quarterback, in the mix as well. They only have 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. There's only 1 with any significant game experience. It's not crazy to think that this could be Sean Clifford's last season at Penn State. So when you put it all together, they better have enough guys to compete for this job at this time next year, regardless of what Sean Clifford decides to do or what he does. Maybe he's so good this year, he stays next year. I don't know. We'll see. But at any rate, they needed it. They got it done. Obviously, they must hold on to these guys, but I don't know if I see that being a huge issue. They both seem to be pretty well enamored with the Nittany Lions. And, again, I think it says all you need to know that Yurcich was pretty much, from the time he got here, on this guy pretty hard.
Okay. Drew Allar, right,
Yes.
Greg? Okay. All right. I'm going to take my foot out of my mouth. Drew Allar. Let me just ask you this, Greg. If Mike Yurcich isn't Penn State's offensive coordinator and it's still Kirk Ciarrocca, do you see any way, would Drew still be a Penn State verbal?
I'm going to say no, just because, Kirk Ciarrocca. Now, who knows? This was one of the fastest rising quarterback recruits in the country. I mean, he shot up the rankings. He has a chance to shoot up the rankings even higher. Places like Notre Dame and schools all over the country came into the mix on him after Penn State offered. So it's not crazy to think that if Mike Yurcich was elsewhere or if Notre Dame had offered, that Penn State may have got into the mix with Kirk Ciarrocca. But I think this is just, I don't want to make this a statement that says Kirk Ciarrocca couldn't recruit or he didn't know what he wanted, but I think it's easier to sell Penn State's outlook on offense now than it would have, with Mike Yurcich than it would have been with Kirk Ciarrocca, which again, you'll just always sit here, I think, and wonder what exactly the point of hiring Kirk Ciarrocca was. I just can't help but to think back to those comments James Franklin made about it being a better fit with Mike Yurcich and all that, as if he didn't make the decision. But that's here nor there. No, I don't think he would be at this point. No.
Okay. I had a funny feeling you might say that. So that leads me to the next recruiting tidbit. For the first time in a long time, there's going to be some visiting of State College.
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope. It's scheduled to be this weekend. Drew Allar, the 4-star quarterback.
Not this weekend. No, Bob, not this weekend.
All right, 2 weekends.
No, June.
Oh, it's in June. All right.
Yes.
I got to get my A game back together. I swear I just read a story about a official visit weekend coming up. June, he's going to visit with Bo Prabula. All right. There's going to be some other people at this weekend as well. What does it mean for Penn State to have some kids back on campus? James always talks about getting the kids on campus is a great way to sell the program, a great way to close the deal. So when they do set foot on campus, if it's whether it's this week, probably not, but in June, most likely, what does it mean for Penn State to have these guys visit?
Yeah, so the hope here, of course, is that the current NCAA dead period that's been in effect since just about this time last year, that runs until May 31st, expires June 1st, and that way kids can visit campus at least in June, presumably in July, and then maybe even in August before the season starts. So, yeah, they're looking at bringing in some uncommitted guys the weekend of like June 11 through 13. One of those kids, Nick Singleton, the 4-star running back at Governor Mifflin, just put Penn State and a bunch of other power programs in his top 9 on Tuesday night. And then at the end of the month, June 25 through 27, I believe, that's what you're getting at. They're looking at having a lot of the commits in town then. And of course, whether or not they can have the commits and other uncommitted targets will kind of depend on what the rules are at that point in time in terms of capacity limits and things like that. And again, assuming that the NCAA does let the dead period turn to a quiet period or even a contact period on June 1st, as many expect they will. But yeah, you're right, Bob. Getting those kids back to campus. I mean, we've heard multiple times now from numerous coaches between the start of the Zoom conference calls, which was, I think, April of last year, and now, where, of course, they continue, how many times we've heard coaches talk about recruiting and also mention that, you know, it's really a challenge when you can't have guys on campus and you can't bring them and show them what many think is the best part of Penn State's recruiting pitch. So obviously this is huge for them and everybody else, and it is going to be one crazy summer, Bob, on the recruiting trail between visits, offers, commitments, decommitments, flips. It's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen, I think.
Is Drew Allar the best kid to date in Penn State's class, or do you like another player better just in terms of potential?
You know, it's a good question. I mean, I think you need the guys that they have committed in this class to win. But with the two, you know, you need a quarterback. I just don't see any way around that in this point. I'm not saying anything that everyone out there doesn't know, but, you know, you need good receivers, great tight ends. Penn State has that. You need a guy who can anchor your offensive line. Penn State has that. Same with a, defensive end. You need a great pass rusher. They have that in this class so far too. But if you have all those pieces and you don't have a quarterback that can get the job done, a lot of times, more often than not, I don't want to say you're wasting those guys' talent, but you're probably not going to get to where you want to go with the way the game is played. So now Penn State has 2 4-stars. So I'll combine them, Bob, and say, yeah, they're the 2 most important guys in this class. Does it look like Drew is maybe more, he's probably going to end up ranked higher? Does that mean, is that the end all be all? No. But they need one of these guys to hit. It'd be pretty difficult, I think, to bring in 2 4-star quarterbacks who I believe would have to be the 2 highest rated quarterbacks brought in the James Franklin era. I could be wrong about that. And look, they've brought in some guys in years past who were 4-stars that have not worked out as planned. It's really, if you go, this is not what you asked, but if you go back and look at the recruiting at the quarterback position over the last handful of years, it has always looked better on paper than it did when the final results came through in a lot of ways. So I don't want to put the cart too far ahead of the horse, but Bob, with these 2 guys, if you get 2 players and both sign and you get them in here early, which it seems like both want to enroll in January, and you get them rolling, I mean, it's the kind of thing that can change your program if one of them steps up and plays like you expect. So, yeah, I'll lump those 2 together, but say for sure there's no doubt that the answer to that question is yes.
Okay, you're listening to the Blue White Breakdown podcast, PennLive's Penn State football podcast. I'm Bob Flounders, Greg Pickel with me talking recruiting. We're almost halfway through this thing. I've already butchered Drew's name. I've got it right now. It was really Greg's fault, Drew Allar. I got the recruiting weekend horribly wrong. It's actually the last weekend in June, I believe, the 25th through the 27th. It's not this weekend coming up. But I'm going to finish this podcast strong. Greg, before we get to you had a chance to talk with Anthony Poindexter, Penn State's new safeties coach and co-defensive coordinator, along with Dave Jones. He wrote something as well. One last Penn State football question for you. It's trivia. I know you're not ready for it. I think I saw on Twitter, Drew was wearing the number 14, I think, for his verbal commitment thing. I'm almost positive I have that right. Greg, how many Penn State quarterbacks that have been either famous or infamous in the past can you name who have worn the number 14 at Penn State? I'm thinking of 3.
Christian Hackenberg. You got the other 2.
Oh, all right. Todd Blackledge wore number 14 at Penn State. And, of course, Anthony Morelli wore number 14 at Penn State. So you went 1 for 3, so that's not great. That's a failing grade. But let's move on to Anthony Poindexter. You had a chance via Zoom to talk with him on Monday. Dave Jones was on the call as well. I read Dave's story about Anthony and kind of the safety that he was in college when he was a 2-time All-American at Virginia. And the safety, the way that he played the game as well as he played it, the game has evolved, and you have to be much more nimble in space, ability to cover, versatile. He acknowledged that it's a different game maybe than the game he played, Greg, but he's coming here from Purdue. Was there one or two takeaways that stood out from his presser that you kind of picked up on that you think the fan base would like to know?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a lot of vague kind of general stuff, and that's because he's only been on campus for about a week before he talked to us, so he didn't really want to comment with good reason on a lot of the guys that he's just getting to know. But, clearly he's happy that Jaquan Brisker has decided to come back, and he thinks he can be really good. He said he started to build a relationship with Jonathan Sutherland, and, we'll see what those guys do during spring practice. Ultimately, to me, he has two major priorities here now that he's a member of James Franklin's staff, and that's improving the pass coverage of the safeties, because we know that most of the last couple of years they've been pretty good in run support, but pass coverage has been a bit of a challenge at times. So I think that's priority number one. And then priority two is getting Penn State a little bit more of a foothold in that Maryland, Delaware, Washington, D.C., Virginia recruiting territory. I know that they've done pretty well there over the years, but with Tyler Bowen leaving, someone has to step in and fill that void. He's recruited it. He's obviously played there. So I think Anthony Poindexter is the right guy for that job. So those two things are kind of the highlights for me. We'll see how things shake out. But yeah, interesting guy who obviously has had a heck of a playing career and has done a lot throughout his coaching career so far. And it's very much like the Taylor Stubblefield hire. I mean, it's a guy that did it at a really high level in college. And what can he do to teach those guys what he did in, his playing days? So I think it went really well in year one with Taylor Stubblefield, all things considered. I mean, obviously, Jahan Dotson was outstanding, and some of the younger receivers were impressive. So if Poindexter can get maybe Brisker to do a Jahan Dotson impression, and I don't know if that's totally fair because I think Brisker was an All-American by somebody, so yes. That's not exactly fair. Okay. But if he can get somebody to take a couple of guys really to take that kind of a step forward, Penn State's going to be in a much better shape when it comes to defending the pass in 2021.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tee you up on that with the very category, Greg. Enzo Jennings, second year at Penn State now, played very sparingly in 2020. He was in the 2020 class, Greg. He was a very high-ranked athlete. I think after you got past Curtis Jacobs, the young linebacker Penn State likes, and Theo Johnson, who emerged during the second half of the season as a tight end in Penn State's two tight end set. I think Enzo Jennings was right below those guys, maybe in terms of ranked prospects. What about maybe Anthony just getting him up to speed? Was Enzo a guy that when they were assembling the class that you were pretty high on? And do you think you're going to learn a lot about Anthony's ability to develop young safeties with watching him maybe work with a guy like Enzo Jennings this year?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, between Enzo Jennings, who we saw a little bit, I believe, at the end of last season. It may have been, I want to say it was the Illinois game, but it could have been the one before that. I think he got a little bit of playing time, and I'll be really interested to see what kind of jump he makes in year two. The same goes for Tyler Rudolph, who's a guy that thought maybe might play a little bit more last season, didn't end up necessarily being the case. So I'm curious to see what he can do. And then Jair Brown's the other one. He got a shout out from Poindexter on social media the other day for the winter workouts, and you can sometimes take those or leave it for what it is. But when they shared the photo of him, Bob, he looked bigger than he did the last time we saw him. So I think, if he made the kind of offseason jump that Brisker did from year one to year two, then he might be a guy that we're talking more about in July and August compared to now. So yeah, I think those three guys, all a little bit different experience-wise and age-wise, but yeah, a lot of people are going to be watching during spring practice to see where Enzo Jennings is at based on where he was, coming out of high school and as a recruit.
Okay, let's conclude this edition of the Blue White Breakdown with a little discussion about a former PennLive employee. That's right. I think I can say that because it's true. Adam Breneman, the former Penn State Penn State tight end who played a couple of years at Penn State, had some knee issues. Everyone knows that. Took some time off, actually briefly retired, re-emerged at UMass and played at an All-American level for a couple of years, was actually an All-American before his knee problems surfaced again. Greg, it was almost literally a year ago. It was right before the pandemic, unfortunately, got very, very, very serious. He made the decision. He was a political consultant working in Harrisburg. He made a decision to give college coaching a try. He was an offensive grad assistant for Herm Edwards at Arizona State. And after 1 year with the Sun Devils, Herm elevated him to tight ends coach, an assistant coaching job. He's still 25. He turns 26 at the end of this month. But that's a pretty big leap for a young coaching prospect to make in 1 year. He's really excited. I had a chance to talk about him. We have a story about how Adam's doing out in he lives in Scottsdale with Arizona State. That's a team that's pretty exciting. They have a pretty veteran coaching staff. They have some young talent. They finished 2-2. Greg, just your thoughts on Adam Breneman being a position coach at such a young age. As far as we can tell, that's almost a great indicator that if he wants to pursue this, and he told me he does, it sure seems like, Greg, he's got a very bright future in the sport of coaching. He's a guy, we talked about Taylor Stubblefield, we talked about Poindexter, guys that players can look at to see, hey, they did it at a very high level, and now they're going to coach me. Arizona State kids they can see the tape of Adam at UMass, even at Penn State. That's got to be a really nice, I think, recruiting tool for Adam in his tool chest as he tries to establish himself as a recruiter as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it, Bob. I mean, I can't say with any degree of certainty that he's the youngest FBS position coach assistant, but I have to think, I don't know how much younger they could get, frankly. I mean, it was interesting in your story, which you can find PennLive.com/Penn State football. Sign up for the PennLive Sports Insider. You'll get it there. When I was interested, I've always wondered what the connection was, and it was a strength coach that was the connection between him and Arizona State and Herm Edwards. So that makes more sense now. A lot of other good details from Adam, including what life is like on the other recruiting side of the fence. He was a highly coveted recruit and wanted by everyone, and now he's trying to do the inverse and be the school that goes after those highly coveted guys and that are wanted by everyone. And how do you stand out? So that was interesting too. I mean, you and I have known Adam for a long time. Great communicator, great guy, obviously very intelligent about the game of football and life in general. So it doesn't surprise me that he's having this kind of success so soon. And you're right. I mean, the sky's kind of the limit for him when you're a position coach at this age. And if you develop some guys at this age, I mean, you're talking about, you hear about these guys who, are kind of the young savants and they get coordinator jobs at 28 and head coaching jobs at 30. I mean, that's the kind of track he could be on. And, again, he always has been very good about just everything you need to do to keep moving forward. So none of this is really a surprise, but certainly a lot of good details in there. And obviously he's doing well out in Arizona.
Yeah. Adam was a member of Bill O'Brien's 2013 recruiting class. Greg, there was another 5-star in that recruiting class. And I'm going to ask you one more trivia question that I think you're going to get right. Is Christian Hackenberg the top quarterback coach in all of high school football in America?
In Winslow Township, New Jersey. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, hey, good for him. He's working down there with Bill Belton at Bill Belton's high school, which, for some reason I wanted to say he went to Timber Creek, but that's not right. So
Winslow Township, you got it.
Yep. So, no, good for him. That's pretty neat. Obviously, that will attract some attention to that school with those two working together there. And I know we will be interested in following how that goes because I know at one point Christian was looking into a baseball career. I guess that is no more. But, hey, he has a lot of coaching connections. I know when you and Joe Hermit went down to Fork Union back when he was in high school, the stories that you guys told down there kind of mentioned the coaching tree that he grew up under and around and with. So for him to go into coaching, certainly I don't think it's a surprise to anyone.
Yeah. So you never know when we're going to talk about Hackenberg and Breneman together again on the same podcast, but they're both kind of branching out a little bit nicely, different parts of the country. I think Scottsdale, Arizona, no offense to New Jersey residents, is a little bit nicer than Winslow Township at this time of year. So I advantage Adam Breneman, but we're going to check back. We'll be checking in on both of those guys, Greg. We're going to wrap up this podcast just real quick. I know we usually do it halfway through, but just tell the audience where to find us, where to rate us, and how they can get more of us if they really want that.
That's right, Bob. This is episode 1 of 2 this week of the Penn State Blitz. You can find all of them because you and Dave Jones are back at the end of the week, but you can find all of them. PennLive.com/Penn State Football is where you find the stories. Get your app wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. You can find our audio there. And the videos are at youtube.com/allpennstate.